Story 1. It had been another long, dreary night shift at the Tillamook cheese factory. As the parts department guy, the overnight hours could really drag. But at least it allowed me to make some extra cash to support my wife Jen and our 2 young kids. Around 1 a.m., I had to venture out to the separate warehouse about 100 feet from the main plant to grab a replacement motor. Rain pounded on the roof as I opened the large garage door and drove the forklift inside. The cavernous space was mostly dark, except for a single LED motion light illuminating the far back corner. Weird, I thought, since I was the only one there. But I shrugged it off and headed toward the racks to retrieve the motor. As I threw it onto a pallet, I could have sworn I heard faint footsteps coming from that back corner. "Hello!" I called out, heart thumping. No response. I must be losing it from lack of sleep, I told myself, quickly loading the motor and driving back to the main building. After chatting with the maintenance guys and taking a smoke break, I returned around 2 a.m. to lock up the warehouse. As I approached the open garage door, I glanced inside. The motion light in the back was now off. Relieved, I pulled the door shut and began walking back to the exit. That's when I heard them again, unmistakable footsteps. My head whipped around as the motion light flickered on, followed by lights leading straight toward me, as if someone was slowly making their way across the warehouse. Emerging from the shadows was a man dressed head to toe in black, face riddled with creepy tattoos. Our eyes locked, and he just stared. In a shaky voice, I demanded, "Who are you? You can't be in here." He didn't utter a word, that sinister expression remaining fixed. At 6'2" and 220 pounds, I'm no pushover. But the vibe this guy was giving off sent chills down my spine. When he pulled a knife from his pocket, I stumbled back a few steps. "Okay, man. Okay, just take it easy." As I radioed for security, he bolted toward the back exit. It felt like an eternity until I finally heard shouting and footsteps from outside. The guards rushed in, but the man was already gone, having climbed a barbed wire fence and vanished into the darkness. My supervisor, Randy, reviewed the security footage, seeing the tattooed trespasser slipping onto the property and into the warehouse. After that, we had to keep everything locked down tight at all times. For weeks after, every little sound or shadow would make me jump. Who was that guy? What was he doing lurking around at night? And most disturbing, what would he have done if I hadn't radioed for help? These questions plagued my mind constantly. I found myself unable to sleep, straining my wife Jen with my constant pacing and mumbling about the tattooed man. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, certain I could hear his footsteps. One night, while taking my usual walk around the neighborhood with our German Shepherd Bucky, I thought I saw a figure duck into the shadows up ahead. My heart raced. Could it be him? Maybe he lived in this area and had just been casing the cheese factory. I started taking Bucky on a different route every evening, afraid we were being watched. Jen thought I was losing my mind over one weird incident at work. In reality, the thought of that sinister-looking man and his knife had completely consumed and terrified me. Graphic nightmares made me dread falling asleep. They always ended with a tattooed stranger looming over me, his twisted smile the last thing I saw before jolting awake in terror. Last Thursday evening, the kids had baseball and gymnastics practice, so I found myself home alone for a few hours. The setting sun cast long shadows across the backyard as I took Bucky out one last time before dark. As we rounded the shed, I gasped. Etched in the dirt was a crude stick figure with tattooed slashes across its face. My mind flooded with horrible possibilities. Had he been here while we were all away, inside our home? I scrambled inside and checked every door and window. Locked, thank God. But had he copied our key and made himself a spare? What if? Bucky's incessant barking drew me to the sliding glass door leading to the backyard. I pulled back the curtain and felt my blood turn to ice. There stood the man, his tattooed face illuminated by the moonlight. Our eyes locked just like at the warehouse. He held a finger to his lips and slowly shook his head. I clutched the steak knife I'd grabbed from the kitchen, my knuckles whitening. He began walking toward me, shadows flickering across his cruel smirk. I longed to scream, but could only watch in horror as he drew closer and closer. When his hand went into his jacket pocket, instinct kicked in. I ripped the door open and flung the knife with everything I had before turning to run for dear life. I heard a heavy thud and shattering glass behind me as Bucky's barks grew more frantic. Heart pounding, I hit the bathroom and grabbed Jen's still-hot hair straightener from the counter. Then I hurled open the linen closet door and squeezed inside, weapon in hand. The closet was almost pitch black, except for a thin sliver of dim light from the crack at the bottom. Minutes ticked by like hours, my pulse raging. Just as I began to think he had fled, a pair of boots appeared under the door, unmoving. From below, I could hear Bucky whimpering softly. Dread washed over me. The doorknob began to jiggle. Again and again, harder each time. Oh God, any moment now it would fling open and he'd be on me. I tried my damnedest not to sob. Suddenly, the doorknob stopped. In the silence, I held my breath, waiting. After what felt like an eternity, those heavy footsteps finally retreated from the hall. But any sense of relief was cut short by another low, guttural whimper. Bucky. My heart sank as hot tears streamed down my cheeks. I knew in that moment he was gone, my poor, sweet pup. The thought of what that monster did to him consuming me with anguish. I sat in the closet for 2 more hours, still as a statue, not making a sound. Every creak and moan of the house made me flinch. Had he killed Bucky just for sport, or did he have something even more sinister planned next? I couldn't let go of the hair straightener, my palms sweating. After what felt like forever, heavy footsteps entered the hallway, closing in on the closet again. I held my breath, barely able to see through the tears blinding me. Those boots stopped once more just outside the closet door. From below, an unmistakable dark chuckling, taunting me. My cries became muffled sobs as I clapped a hand over my mouth, bracing myself. With one final jiggle of the doorknob, the footsteps retreated down the hall and faded away into the night. And that's where I remained, paralyzed by sickening grief and fear, trapped inside that closet in the dark. Story 2. It had been a long, draining day of working from home on various freelance writing projects. After grinding away for hours on end, I finally decided to call it a night around midnight. A nice hot shower sounded perfect to help unwind before climbing into bed. As the steaming water pounded my tired muscles, I let my mind wander, already feeling the day's stresses melting away. That's when a faint clicking noise pulled me back to reality. It was tough to pinpoint exactly where it came from, but it definitely sounded like it originated from inside the house. "Hello!" I called out tentatively, killing the water flow to listen closer. When the strange click echoed again, right outside the bathroom door, my heart skipped a beat. Adrenaline coursing, I quickly rinsed off and hopped out, scrambling to throw on a t-shirt and shorts with shaky hands. I flung open the bathroom door, immediately noticing the hallway light had been switched off. But I knew for a fact I'd left it on earlier. A cold tendril of dread snaked down my spine. At first I figured maybe the power had just flickered, causing the lights to go out. But then I noticed the switch itself had been manually turned to the off position on the other side of the hall. My mouth went dry as I flicked it back on, the overhead bulbs firing up like normal. Either I was going crazy, or someone was screwing with me. With leaden legs, I crept toward the stairs, peering down to the first floor. Not a single light appeared to be on down there either. One rogue switch breaking, maybe, I could rationalize. But 2 separate manual switches. No way that was a coincidence. Something wasn't right. My heart pounded in my ears as I stood frozen at the top of the staircase, trying to decide what to do. Call the police over a couple weird noises and an off light. Don't be ridiculous. It was probably just some kids outside playing a prank. Right? The more I lingered in indecision, the more uneasy I became. Finally, I started creeping down the stairs one by one, stopping halfway as a deafening alarm resonated from the back of the house. I damn near leaped out of my skin, sprinting the rest of the way down in blind panic. There in the kitchen, muddy boot prints led in a trail from the back door, which hung wide open. My breath caught in my throat. The door was always kept locked, and all the windows looked undisturbed from the outside. Whoever had gotten in must have found a way to unlock it. With trembling hands, I quickly secured the door and double-checked that the front was bolted too. Only then did I dial 911 with shaking fingers, struggling to recount to the dispatcher the strange events that had unfolded over the past half hour. As someone was in my house. I didn't see them, but the back door was open, and there are muddy footprints, and the two officers who arrived seemed skeptical, giving me looks of bewilderment as I rambled about the lights and noises while they looked around. In the end, they didn't find any signs of a break-in or intruder, and chalked it up to me being confused. "Looks like you just didn't secure the back door properly, buddy," one of them said with a shrug before leaving. Maybe he was right. I did tend to get forgetful sometimes. Still, something about the whole evening felt deeply unsettling in a way I couldn't quite articulate. Over the following days and weeks, my nerves remained frayed. Every creak or bump in the night made me flinch. I started obsessively double or triple checking that all the doors and windows were locked up tight before bed. Sometimes even in the middle of the night when anxious thoughts jolted me awake in a cold sweat. 2 months after that bizarre incident, I was ripped from sleep by a loud clang echoing from the back of the house. Body tense, I laid in bed frozen, waiting for another sound that never came. It wasn't until first light that I gingerly crept out to investigate, my heart dropping into my stomach. There it was, the back door, unlocked once again. I smacked myself on the forehead, chastising my dumb lapse in memory from the night before. Except, I couldn't actually remember if I had locked it or not. Over the past couple months, I'd let that obsessive habit slide in hopes of regaining peace of mind. But now, the doubts and fears came roaring back tenfold. See, part of me always wondered, what if it wasn't just forgetfulness that night? What if there really was an intruder who unlocked that door and simply walked right back out after getting a good look around? The nightmarish possibilities made my skin crawl. A harmless prowler, or someone casing the place for a future break-in. Or far, far worse, a premeditated attack. From that day on, I went full rear window, obsessively keeping every window, door and blinds locked up tighter than a drum. Even interior rooms, I would deadbolt for good measure. At the smallest sound, my head would whip around like a frightened deer, scanning for any hint of an intruder or misplaced item. Yet nothing ever happened. No further signs someone had breached the home, no possessions disturbed or missing. Just the clicking noises, and the flickering lights, and the occasional door left tantalizingly unlocked, as if by ghostly hands. Maybe this place really was haunted by some malicious entity instead of a living, breathing person. More and more, that notion burrowed into my mind, scrambling my sense of reality. I could no longer reside here, in this place that should have felt safe and secure, yet instilled sheer dread and paranoia instead. Plans were quickly made to move out at the end of the month and find a fresh start somewhere new. In the final days of packing up my belongings, those weird occurrences only seemed to amplify, like the house itself knew its time was running short. Lights flicking off and on in rooms I'd just left. Doors slamming by invisible forces. The faint, maddening clicking at all hours. The night before the moving truck arrived, I woke jarringly to a bone-chilling sound. Heavy, plodding footsteps coming from the hallway. I froze under the covers, choking back panicked gasps as they passed right outside my bedroom door, continuing down the hall and growing fainter until silence. The sick, shaky feeling that washed over me was indescribable. Something was in my home, watching, waiting, toying with me one last time before I escaped this waking nightmare. I didn't dare move or make a sound, trapped in a cold sweat for the remainder of that eternal night. First light came and I bolted from the house as if it were on fire, slamming the door shut behind me with a shudder of relief. Whatever malevolent presence had invaded, I was finally free of it. Or was I? To this day, The faint sound of footsteps or clicking noises sends shivers down my spine. A lingering curse of whatever evil lay trapped in that place. All I can hope is that it didn't somehow follow me here. Story 3. It was just another typical winter evening in Oakwood, the kind of night I'd experienced thousands of times before in the sleepy little town. After getting home from work and heating up a lean cuisine, I leashed up Rex for our nightly walk around 7 p.m. The sun had already set, but Oakwood took pride in keeping the streets well lit, giving me a sense of safety as we ventured out. Our usual route took us past Anderson Park, a decent-sized green space in the heart of the neighborhood. As I turned onto the path that ran alongside it, something immediately caught my eye. A lone car parked on the side of the road up ahead. Its headlights were off, but the interior light glowed dimly, making the silhouette of a person visible in the front seat. An uneasy feeling settled into the pit of my stomach. We were the only ones out on this stretch, no houses for at least a quarter mile. Why would someone be parked here of all places at this hour? I fought the urge to stare, not wanting to draw any attention as Rex and I approached. Still, I couldn't resist darting my eyes over every few seconds to check if the person was still there. Just as we reached the halfway point, they looked up suddenly, meeting my gaze through the windshield. I felt my cheeks flush hot as I quickly averted my eyes. "Excuse me. Hey, could you help me out for a second?" A man's voice called out. I looked over to see him holding up a hand and motioning me towards the car. He seemed harmless enough, average build, probably mid-30s like myself, wearing a jacket and knit cap against the cold. Part of me instinctively wanted to get the hell out of there, but some deeper pang of human decency forced my feet to stop. "What's up?" I asked cautiously, Rex sniffing at the car tires. "Sorry man, my ride just crapped out on me. Spent the last 20 minutes trying to get her started up again with no luck," he explained with an apologetic shrug, throwing out car lingo I could barely understand. "You know anything about engines?" Something about the way he asked struck me as strange, almost forced, but I really didn't want to get involved. "Sorry, afraid I can't help with that sort of thing," I replied, firmly pulling Rex's leash to keep walking. "Hope you get it sorted out though." Wait, he pleaded as I passed by his window. "Come on man, it's just my down alternator or something. You sure you can't take a quick look? Be a huge help." I shook my head apologetically. I don't know the first thing about car repairs. Best of luck with it though. "I will. Thanks anyway," he relented, rolling his window back up. Relief washed over me as I heard the ignition turn over and the car slowly pulled back out onto the street. That strange encounter faded into the background as Rex, and I continued on our way. But as we neared the end of the path 10 minutes later, something made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. That same car, now idling on a dimly lit side street with no other homes in sight. I felt my chest tighten as a cold sweat prickled my skin. There's no way. Instinct took over as I jerked Rex's leash and booked it in the opposite direction, breaking into a jog until we hit the main road lined with residential houses. My heart pounded in double time as I spun around every few seconds, terrified I might see that car again. What the hell did that guy want with me? I didn't slow down until I'd reached my driveway and rushed inside, bolting the door behind me. With shaky hands, I called the non-emergency police line, describing the bizarre encounter and the man's suspicious behavior, wishing I had thought to note his license plate in the moment. A few nights later, I decided to brave the park loop once more after debating whether I was just being paranoid. Maybe he was simply passing through, having car troubles like he claimed. As Rex and I approached the same area, an uneasy feeling washed over me again. There was a car, parked in the same spot alongside the park. Interior light off this time. Every hair on my body stood on end as we quickly rerouted, my heart sinking. This time when I called the police, I insisted they go check it out, describing the exact location. About an hour later, 2 squad cars came screaming down my street with their cherries blazing, startling me through the front window. They must have caught the guy. I raced outside, shivering against the bitter wind, as the officers inspected the car with flashlights drawn and hands on their holsters. After tense minutes, they stood down and approached me with grim expressions. "Mr. Collins, this vehicle you reported was actually stolen last week during a home invasion about 40 miles away," one of them explained somberly. "We're processing it now for evidence and prints. Any idea why this person seemed to be following you?" My stomach turned to lead as I recalled my unsettling encounter with the man, chills raking my body. Wait, if he wasn't really having car issues, then what did he want from me? What was he going to do if I had tried helping like he asked? The possibilities made me nauseous. This whole time, I had felt so safe in our quiet little neighborhood, yet some deranged criminal had been watching me, maybe even preparing to take me somewhere, or worse. My eyes sheened with tears of terror at the thought of what potentially lay ahead. For me, for my wife and kids. As the officers cleared the scene and I retreated back inside, the weight of the situation seemed to crush me. How could I ever feel secure going for walks around Oakwood again? What if the man came back, enraged I'd reported his vehicle? Every creak of the floorboards made me flinch. I didn't sleep at all that night, or many nights after. Constantly peering through curtains, jumping at every sound or shadow. A prisoner at my own home, deathly afraid of what might be lurking out there in the darkness. All because of one strange encounter with a stranger who looked just like anyone else, but harbored unknown malice in his heart. I still wonder what exactly his plan was that fateful night, and if I'll ever stop looking over my shoulder.